Today, we're diving into a landmark UK legal case that really tested the limits of government power. It's a story that puts journalists head-to-head with the government, and it asks a huge question. When it comes to free speech, who really gets to have the final say? So just think about that for a second. What if the government could actually decide whose voice you hear on the news? Imagine you're watching a report, and instead of hearing the person on screen, their voice has been replaced by an actor. I know, it sounds like something out of a dystopian movie, but this was a reality, and it's what kicked off the whole legal showdown we're about to explore.
All right, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the broadcasting ban that started everything. Then we'll see how journalists challenged that power. We'll get into the court's big dilemma, look at the final judgment, and then, most importantly, explore the case's surprising and lasting echo.
Okay, first up, the broadcasting ban. To really get what's happening here, we need to jump back in time to the late 1980s in the United Kingdom. This was a period of really intense political tension, especially around the conflict in Northern Ireland. So in 1988, the government stepped in. The Home Secretary issued this pretty shocking directive. The official reason? National security. They wanted to deny what they famously called the oxygen of publicity to groups connected with terrorism. But here's the really weird part. It didn't ban reporting on them, it just banned the sound of their actual voices. So news channels had to get creative, using subtitles, or even hiring actors to literally voice over their words.
All right, Section 2, a challenge to power. Now, as you can probably guess, this did not go down well. Journalists and broadcasters were frankly outraged. They saw it as a direct attack on their profession, and they were not about to take it lying down. They decided to fight. A group of them, led by a journalist named Michael Brind, took the government to court. Their argument was pretty simple. The Home Secretary had gone way too far, and this was an unlawful restriction on freedom of expression. For them, this was about something much bigger than just one story. It was a fundamental attack on the free press and the public's right to receive information without the government acting as a filter. And just like that, the legal battle began. So this brings us right to the heart of it all, the court's dilemma. The key thing to understand here is that the challengers weren't just arguing the ban was a bad idea. No, they were saying it was unlawful. And for a court to even begin to answer that, they first had to decide, well, how do we judge this? What's the legal test we should be using?
This whole process is called judicial review. Think of it as the court's ability to act as a referee, making sure the government is playing by the rules. It's not about a judge saying, I would have done that differently. It's about a judge asking, did you have the legal power to do that in the first place? And the massive question here was, which rulebook should they use? And this is the absolute crux of the case. On one side, you had the traditional UK test, known as irrationality. And believe me, the bar for this is ridiculously high. To win, the journalists had to prove the government's decision was so off-the-wall outrageous that no sane person could have made it. Yeah, good luck with that. But their lawyers argued for something different, a standard from European human rights law called proportionality. This is a totally different ballgame. It asks, was the government using a sledgehammer to crack a nut? Did the action go further than necessary? It forces a judge to actually weigh the government's goal against the damage done to free speech. It's a much more intense way of looking at it. So you can see the difference, right? Under that traditional irrationality test, the court's hands are pretty much tied. It's a simple two-step question. Was the decision totally absurd? If the answer is no, then the court has to back off and let the government's decision stand. So what the challengers were asking for was huge. They were asking the court to adopt a brand new, much more powerful tool to protect their rights. And so, after all the arguments, the case made its way to the very top, the highest court in the UK at the time, the House of Lords. The entire media and legal world was watching. Was the court about to expand its own power, all in the name of human rights? The answer was no. The court sided with the government. The journalists lost their case. The ban was upheld. It was a lawful use of the Home Secretary's power. And this quote from one of the judges, Lord Bridge, gets right to the heart of why. He basically said the courts can't just start applying the European Convention on Human Rights and sneak it into domestic law by the back door. You see, for them, the problem wasn't whether the ban was a good idea or not. It was constitutional. They were essentially saying, look, our job is to apply the laws that Parliament passes. And right now, the European Convention on Human Rights is not officially part of UK law. For them, a group of unelected judges to just start using an international treaty to overrule the government, well, that felt like a massive overreach. They believed that if those rights were going to be brought into UK law, it had to be done by Parliament. That was their job, not the court.
Now, you might think that's the end of the story, a defeat for free speech, case closed. But this is where it gets really interesting, because in a strange way, by losing this battle, Michael Brind and the other challengers actually paved the way for a much, much bigger victory down the road. What the Brind judgment did was shine a giant spotlight on a huge weakness in the UK's legal system. It proved beyond a doubt that without a specific law from Parliament, fundamental rights like freedom of expression weren't really protected from government action. The case became a powerful rallying cry for reform. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was concrete proof that something had to change.
In fact, you can draw a direct line from that court decision in 1991 to what happened next. A few years later, in 1997, a new government came in promising to bring rights home. And in 1998, Parliament passed the Human Rights Act. And guess what that act did? It did exactly what the judges in Brind said was Parliament's job. It officially made the European Convention on Human Rights part of UK domestic law, giving the courts the very tools they had just said they couldn't create for themselves. And so the story of Brind leaves us with this critical question that's just as relevant today as it was back then. In this constant tug of war between national security and fundamental freedoms, how much power should unelected judges have to tell a democratically elected government what it can and can't do? It's a debate that gets to the very heart of how a democracy works, and there's still no easy answer.